The letter was already in the Duke's hand when the truth struck him. Not the truth contained in ink, but the truth in the seal pressed into crimson wax. Blackmir, the Hartley mark, a signet that had once sealed threats, contracts, and quiet ruin. Alaric Whitcomb, Duke of Ashbourne, stood beside the tall window of Mr. Julian Hargreaves' chambers, where London's afternoon lay colorless beneath a veil of winter cloud. The solicitor's voice continued, respectful and steady, but Alaric had ceased listening the moment a single line repeated itself, as though the law could not believe its own audacity. The late Edmund Hartley, Earl of Blackmir, had left him everything. Not a token, not an apology, not a minor parcel that might be dismissed as courtesy. Everything. The moorland acres that swallowed sunlight, the manor built from hard gray stone, the private investments that had kept Blackmir powerful even when society shifted its attention elsewhere. The irony was too clean to be accidental. Edmund Hartley had been Alaric's father's enemy in the only way that mattered, not with pistols at dawn or insults across a ballroom. Hartley had ruined him with paper, with influence, with a slow tightening of the world until a proud name became a cautionary tale. Alaric remembered his mother's hands shaking as she folded household ledgers, remembered a fire that burned too low, remembered the way grief made people quieter, then brittle, then gone. "Your Grace," Hargreaves said gently, as one speaks near a wound. "There is a further provision." Alaric did not turn. "Proceed." The Earl had a daughter, Miss Aloan Hartley. She has resided at Blackmir her entire life. The terms stipulate she is to remain there under your protection until such time as she marries or reaches her 30th year. At that time, a settlement is to be released for her independent maintenance. Protection. The word landed heavily, like a key placed in his palm that would also lock him in. Alaric had expected traps in money and land. He had not expected to inherit a life. "What is known of her?" he asked, and even to him his voice sounded too controlled, too neat. "Very little," Hargreaves admitted. The Earl kept her secluded. No season, no court presentation. The staff report she is quiet, studious, and has managed the household since her mother's death. She appears to have been overlooked. That last word went through Alaric like cold air finding a crack in stone. Overlooked was a fate he knew intimately. Before the dukedom found him by accident of death and lineage, he had been the son no one noticed, trained to bow, to wait, to accept. He had learned young that a man could be invisible even while standing in a crowded room. He turned from the window at last. "I shall depart for Blackmir this evening," he said. Hargreaves hesitated, then reached into his case and produced a sealed envelope. "The Earl left this to be delivered only upon your acceptance." Alaric took it without breaking the seal. Some words deserved solitude. The north received him with mist, with wind that smelled of peat and distance. The carriage wheels crushed gravel as Blackmir's gates opened, and the manor emerged from the moors like a stern memory made stone. The staff stood assembled on the steps, black-clad and rigid, but Alaric's gaze slid past them. He searched for the one figure he had been told to expect, the one provision that had turned inheritance into obligation. He saw her at the end of the line, not hiding, not clinging to anyone's sleeve, merely standing slightly apart, as though she had learned not to assume she belonged anywhere. Her gown was dark and plain, her hair arranged with practical restraint rather than fashion's insistence, but her face held a calm that did not invite pity. When Alaric stepped onto the drive, she met his eyes. There was no downcast submission in her gaze, only amber steadiness. Watching, assessing. "Your Grace," the butler began, and words of welcome filled the air like dust stirred from an old carpet. But Aloan spoke before Alaric did, and her voice was low, controlled, almost polite. "So, you are the gentleman who now owns my father's house." The servant stiffened. The moment tightened. Alaric paused, because he understood power, and he understood the difference between cruelty and clarity. "I am the man responsible for it," he replied. Aloan's mouth curved faintly, not a smile, more an acknowledgement of survival. "Then we must both endeavor not to make this arrangement unpleasant." "I did not come to make you unpleasantly situated," he said. Her eyes flickered, as if she had not expected anyone to say such a thing without asking something in return. "I have been informed that I am now your dependent, that I am to remain in this house until marriage or age makes me convenient to dismiss." The phrasing was sharp enough to draw blood, but she said it as one reads a statement from a document. A fact. A sentence already passed. The anger that rose in Alaric was not the loud kind. It was cold and precise. "You will not be dismissed," he said. Her composure faltered for the first time, just briefly, as though her armor had not been designed for kindness. "I do not require kindness, Your Grace. Only permission to remain unobtrusive. I have managed this household since I was 13. If you permit me to continue, I shall stay out of your way." There it was. The learned instinct. Be useful. Be invisible. Do not hope. "That will not be necessary," Alaric said. Eloan's chin lifted, the old reflex to defend herself sharpening her posture. But before she could mistake his meaning, he continued, carefully, as though speaking to someone who had been disappointed too often. "I mean that your assistance will be valued, but you will not be required to vanish. You are not staff, Miss Hartley. You are the daughter of this house. You will be treated accordingly." Silence fell like snow. Eloan stared at him as though he had spoken in a language she had only read about. Vulnerability flashed across her face, raw and unguarded. Then she steadied herself again. "I do not understand," she said quietly. "You need not," Alaric replied. "Only accept that things will be different." The house revealed itself in pieces. Corridors that carried old echoes. Portraits that were watched without warmth. A chapel that smelled of stone and vows. But it was the library that told Alaric the deepest truth. Eloan opened the doors as though she were granting him entry into the only place that had ever belonged to her. Books lined the walls, not arranged to impress visitors, but worn by actual touch. Margins were annotated. Notes were tucked into pages like secret confessions. "My father rarely came here," she said. "He preferred his study." "And you?" Alaric asked. Eloan's fingers rested on the spine of a volume as though it were a living thing. "I spent most of my life here, reading, learning, trying to understand a world I was never permitted to enter." Alaric chose a book at random, one on land reform, recent enough that most noblemen kept it merely to appear informed. "You have opinions," he said. Eloan's expression shifted, her guardedness giving way to something bright and reluctant. "Of course I do." He listened. And something changed while listening. The air between them, once formal and edged, became charged in a quieter way. It was not the heat of scandal. It was the slow warmth of recognition. A man used to being obeyed discovering he preferred being challenged. A woman used to being ignored discovering her words could alter the room. "You disagree with his proposals on tenant education," Alaric observed, turning a page marked with her handwriting. "I do not disagree entirely," Eloan corrected. "But he assumes literacy where none exists. Reform must begin with teaching, not legislation." "You wrote to him." Her cheeks colored faintly. "Anonymously. He assumed the letter came from a landowner. He published it in his second edition." Alaric closed the book slowly. "You should have been credited." "I should have been many things," Eloan said, and the sadness beneath the words was older than her years. The fire crackled. The room grew warmer, or perhaps it was merely the way she looked at him now, as though seeing him clearly for the first time. "Why are you kind?" she asked suddenly, the question surgical in its precision. Alaric set the book aside. He could have deflected. He could have offered polite evasion. Instead, he told her something true enough to survive daylight. "Because I understand what it is to be overlooked," he said, "and I do not wish it on you." For a moment, her eyes held his. Amber, steady, suspicious of hope. Society would soon take notice. "Hey, quick question. How are you feeling right now? Thank you so much for being here. It really means the world to me. I'm working toward 1,000 subscribers, and if Eloan's story is already pulling at your heart, please hit that subscribe button for Duke's Royal Library, smash the like, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. It helps more than you know." "Alright, thank you. Now let's get back to what happens when the main characters." Morning at Blackmir arrived with frost on the windows and silence in the halls. Eloan moved through the house as she always had, efficient and restrained, too practiced at being useful. She inspected linens with the housekeeper, reviewed menus with the cook, checked the stillroom inventory with the precision of someone who had learned young that competence was the only currency she possessed. Alaric watched from the doorway of the morning room, a cup of tea cooling in his hand. She did not see him, or perhaps she chose not to. There was something deliberate in the way she kept her distance, as though proximity might invite expectation, and expectation led to disappointment. "Your Grace," Mrs. Agnes Rowley said, appearing at his elbow with the quiet authority of a woman who had served the house longer than most could remember. Miss Alohan has always managed things well. You need not concern yourself. I am not concerned, Alaric replied. I am observing. Agnes's expression softened with something close to grief. She has had little enough reason to expect notice. The late Earl was not a warm man. He kept her close, but distant, like a book he owned but never read. The comparison struck Alaric as painfully accurate. Did he ever speak of her? He asked. Only to remind the staff she was to be kept occupied and out of sight, Agnes said. She learned early that silence was safer than speech. Alaric's jaw tightened. He set down his cup with more force than intended. By afternoon, he found Alohan in the library again, as though the room called to her the way chapels called to penitents. She stood on a small ladder, reaching for a volume on the highest shelf, her skirts brushing against leather spines. She did not hear him enter. Allow me, Alaric said. Alohan startled, nearly losing her balance. He moved quickly, steadying the ladder with one hand, the other hovering near her waist without touching. I did not mean to alarm you, he said. You did not, she replied, though her breath came faster. I was simply absorbed. She descended carefully, the book clutched against her chest like a shield. Up close, he could see the title. Agricultural Economy and Tenant Welfare. Light reading, he observed. Her mouth curved slightly. There is a tenant dispute on the northern boundary. A family claims the drainage work has flooded their fields. I wish to review the engineering principles before addressing it. Alaric blinked. You intend to address it yourself? I always have, Alohan said simply. The steward reports to me. Or rather, he did. I assume that will change now. Why should it change? She looked at him as though he had asked why water ran downhill. Because you are the Duke. The estate is yours. I am merely the person who knows it best, Alaric finished. I would be a fool to dismiss your knowledge. Alohan's grip on the book loosened slightly. You are serious. Entirely. In fact, I should like to accompany you when you meet with the tenants. Her eyes widened. That is not necessary. Perhaps not, he agreed. But I find I am curious to see how you manage such matters. They rode out the following morning, the moors stretching wild and windswept around them. Alohan sat her horse with easy competence, her dark cloak billowing behind her, her face lifted to the cold air as though she had been starved for open sky. The disputed land lay in a shallow valley where drainage channels had indeed redirected water poorly. The tenant family, a Mr. and Mrs. Bramwell with 3 small children, stood outside their cottage with wary expressions. Alohan dismounted without assistance and approached them with calm authority. Mr. Bramwell, she said, I have reviewed the engineering reports and consulted the original survey maps. You are correct. The drainage was improperly angled. It will be corrected within the fortnight, and your family will receive compensation for the damaged crop. Bramwell's weathered face registered shock. Miss Hartley, we did not expect. You expected to be heard, Alohan said gently. And you have been. The simplicity of it struck Alaric like a blow. She did not condescend. She did not perform charity. She merely addressed the problem with fairness and followed through. As they rode back toward the manor, he said, You have done this often. Since I was old enough to understand land management, she replied. My father cared nothing for tenant welfare. Someone had to, and no one acknowledged it. Alohan's silence was answer enough. That evening, the household staff moved about their duties with a new tension. Alaric noticed the glances exchanged between footmen, the way the maids whispered in corners. He found Mrs. Rowley in the stillroom. What troubles the staff? He asked bluntly. Agnes hesitated, then sighed. They are concerned about Miss Alohan's position, Your Grace. There is talk that it is inappropriate for an unmarried woman to remain under the same roof as an unmarried gentleman, even one of your rank. I am her guardian, Alaric said, though the words felt insufficient. Society does not always recognize such distinctions, Agnes replied carefully. And there are those who would use any excuse to harm her reputation. Alaric's hands clenched. She has done nothing wrong. She need not do anything wrong, Agnes said sadly. She need only exist in proximity to scandal. In the library that night, Alohan sat by the fire, a book open on her lap, though she had not turned a page in many minutes. Alaric entered quietly, 2 glasses of wine in hand. You look troubled, he said, offering her one. She accepted it with a small nod. I overheard the staff. They believe my presence here compromises your reputation. They are mistaken. Are they? Alohan set the glass down untouched. I am a burden. An inconvenience wrapped in legal obligation. You would be well within your rights to send me to live with some distant relation or install me in a cottage on the estate's edge. Alaric sat across from her, the firelight casting shadows across his face. Is that what you believe I should do? I believe, she said carefully, that kindness is often the prelude to disappointment. Men say generous things until generosity becomes inconvenient. I am not one of those men. Her amber eyes searched his face. How can you be certain? Because I know what it costs to be discarded, he said quietly, and I will not do it to another. The fire crackled between them. The room felt smaller, warmer, charged with something neither could name. Alohan's voice dropped to a whisper. Why are you kind to me? He leaned forward slightly, close enough that she could see the shadows beneath his eyes, the weariness that came from carrying old wounds. Because you deserve kindness, he said. And because I find that I cannot look at you without wanting to give it. Her breath caught. The book slipped from her lap, forgotten. For a long moment, neither moved. The air hummed with possibility, with the dangerous warmth of being seen, truly seen, for the first time. Then Alohan rose abruptly, her composure fracturing. I should retire, she said, her voice unsteady. Alaric stood as well, but did not follow. Alohan. She paused at the door, her back to him. Sleep well, he said, though what he meant was something far more complicated. She left without answering, and the library felt colder in her absence. Yet propriety would not survive what followed. Alaric did not sleep. He sat in his chambers, the sealed letter from Edmund Hartley resting on the desk before him like an unexploded shell. He had carried it from London, tucked it into drawers, moved it from table to mantel and back again, but he had not opened it. Now, with the house silent and the fire burning low, he broke the seal. The wax cracked cleanly. The paper unfolded with a whisper. Edmund Hartley's handwriting was precise, controlled, the script of a man who had spent his life commanding others. To the Duke of Ashbourne. If you are reading this, then I am dead, and you have accepted what I have left you. You will wonder why. The answer is not simple, though perhaps it is simpler than you imagine. I destroyed your father. Not out of malice, but out of desperate necessity. Your father discovered a secret that would have ruined not only me, but the woman I loved. My wife, before our marriage, bore a child out of wedlock. A daughter she gave away to protect her family's name. That child was your mother. We are connected by blood, Ashbourne, though neither of us knew it while the damage was being done. I ruined your father to silence him, to protect my wife from the scandal that would have destroyed her. In doing so, I destroyed my own soul. The fortune I leave you was built on that sin. Use it to do what I could not, live with honor. But I ask one thing in return. My daughter, Alohan, knows nothing of this history. She knows only that her father was cold and distant, that he barely acknowledged her existence. I was afraid, you see, that if I loved her as she deserved, I would somehow taint her with my guilt. Protect her, Ashbourne. She has had little enough kindness in her life. Perhaps you can give her what I could not. Edmund Hartley, Earl of Blackmir. Alaric read the letter 3 times. Then he stood, walked to the fire, and held the paper over the flames. His hand shook. He pulled it back. The truth it contained was a blade that cut in every direction. His mother had been baseborn, the abandoned child of Edmund's wife. His father had discovered this secret and threatened exposure, only to be destroyed by Edmund's ruthless response. And now Alaric had inherited everything, including the daughter of the man who had ruined his family to protect this shameful truth. The irony was so bitter it tasted like ash. He folded the letter carefully and locked it in his desk drawer. Some truths were too dangerous to burn and too painful to share. Morning brought frost and a strange unease that seemed to settle over the house like dust. Alaric found Alohan in the breakfast room, her plate untouched, her gaze fixed on the window where mist clung to the moors. You did not sleep well, he observed, taking the seat across from her. Neither did you, she replied without looking at him. He poured tea with deliberate care. Is something troubling you? Alohan's fingers tightened on her cup. Mrs. Rowley informed me that there have been strangers near the estate. Riders at the boundary. Men asking questions in the village about inheritance. Alaric's jaw tightened. What sort of questions? About you. About me. About the terms of my father's will. She finally turned to face him, and her amber eyes were shadowed with worry. I believe my cousin has taken an interest. Sebastian Hartley. You know of him? I made inquiries before leaving London, Alaric said. He is your father's nephew. He expected to inherit Blackmir. Alohan's mouth thinned. He is not a kind man. He believes blood entitles him to everything, regardless of law or decency. Has he contacted you? She hesitated, then withdrew a letter from her pocket. This arrived this morning. Alaric took it, his expression darkening as he read. The language was polite, but the threat beneath was clear. Sebastian intended to visit, to discuss the inheritance, to propose a solution that would benefit them both. He means to marry you, Alaric said flatly. Alohan's face went pale. I will refuse him. He will not accept refusal gracefully. Then I shall refuse him ungracefully, she said, but her voice trembled slightly. Alaric reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The gesture was improper, but he did not care. He will not touch you, he said quietly. I give you my word. Alohan stared at their joined hands, her breath unsteady. You cannot protect me from everything. I can protect you from him. Sebastian Hartley arrived 2 days later, a full day earlier than his letter had indicated. The butler announced him with visible disapproval, and Alaric rose from his desk to meet the threat head-on. Sebastian swept into the drawing room dressed like a man trying too hard to appear respectable. His coat was fashionable but too new, his gloves unworn, his smile practiced and cold. Your Grace, he said with a bow that bordered on mockery. How generous of you to receive me. Mr. Hartley, Alaric replied evenly. Your letter indicated you would arrive tomorrow. I found myself eager to resolve matters quickly. Sebastian's gaze moved past Alaric to where Alohan stood near the window, her spine straight, her expression guarded. Cousin Alohan, you look well. Country life agrees with you. You are not welcome here, Sebastian, Alohan said, her voice low and controlled. Sebastian's smile thinned. A woman in your position does not decide who is welcome. You have no fortune, no prospects, and now you have become a complication. I am here to offer a solution. I require no solution from you. Do you not? Sebastian moved closer, his tone sharpening. You reside under the Duke's roof, unmarried and unchaperoned. Society will draw its own conclusions. Your reputation hangs by a thread, cousin. I offer marriage, respectability, the restoration of your proper place in this family. My proper place is not for you to determine, Alohan said, but her hands clenched at her sides. Alaric stepped between them, his movement subtle but absolute. Say another word to her, he said quietly, and you will learn what it costs. Sebastian's eyes narrowed. Is that a threat, Your Grace? It is a courtesy. A true threat would require less explanation. Sebastian scoffed, but uncertainty flickered across his face. You keep her here like some prize, poisoning her against her own blood. It would be far more respectable if she accepted my proposal and returned to her proper family. Alohan's voice cut through the tension like a blade. You are not my family. You are a man who sees me as a means to reclaim an estate that was never yours. The estate should have been mine, Sebastian hissed, his composure cracking. Edmund promised it to me years ago. Then he met you. His gaze swung to Alaric with undisguised hatred. And he gave everything away to spite me. He gave it away because you are unworthy of it, Alaric said. Sebastian's face flushed with rage. You have no right. I have every right, Alaric interrupted, his voice dropping to something colder. I have ownership. I have legal standing. And I have evidence. The room went silent. Evidence? Sebastian repeated carefully. Of your debts, Alaric said. Your forged instruments. The young men you have cheated at cards. The tradesmen you have swindled. The threats you have made to those who questioned your honor. He paused, letting each word land. Shall I continue, or have I made myself clear? Sebastian's color drained. You are bluffing. I never bluff. Alaric moved closer, his voice quiet enough that only Sebastian could hear. You will leave Blackmir tonight. You will cease your efforts to contest the estate. In return, I will refrain from presenting this evidence to society. You may call it mercy. I call it efficiency. For a long moment, Sebastian stood frozen, hatred and fear warring in his expression. Then he turned on his heel and left without another word. The door slammed behind him, the sound echoing through the manor like a gunshot. Alohan stood trembling, not from fear of Sebastian, but from something stranger and more overwhelming. You protected me, she whispered, as though the words did not quite belong in her mouth. Alaric looked at her, and for the first time his restraint slipped just enough for emotion to show through. Of course, he said. Did you think I would do otherwise? Alohan's voice broke on the truth she had never admitted aloud. No one ever has. The space between them filled with a tension that had nothing to do with propriety and everything to do with hunger. Not hunger of the body alone. Hunger to be chosen, to be defended, to be wanted in a way that did not turn to ash. Alaric stepped closer, stopping just short of touch, as though the air itself required permission. Alohan, he said, and her name sounded like a vow. She looked up at him, her amber eyes bright with unshed tears. I do not know how to trust this. Then do not trust it yet, he replied gently. Only allow it to exist. Her hand rose, hesitant, and touched his chest over his heart. He went very still, as though afraid that movement might shatter the moment. You are real, she said softly, more to herself than to him. I am real, he confirmed. And I am not leaving. This was the moment her position became untenable. Night fell over Blackmir with the weight of something unfinished. Alohan sat in the library long after the household had retired, a book open on her lap that she could not read. Her mind turned over Sebastian's words, the venom in his voice, the way he had looked at her as though she were property to be reclaimed. But more than that, she thought of Alaric, the way he had stepped between her and danger without hesitation, the coldness in his voice when he threatened Sebastian, the precision with which he had dismantled her cousin's pride. No one had ever defended her before. Not like that. Not as though she mattered beyond duty or obligation. The door opened quietly, and she looked up to find Alaric standing in the doorway, still dressed, his cravat loosened as though he too could not find rest. I thought I might find you here, he said. I could not sleep. He crossed the room and took the chair opposite hers. Neither could I. They sat in silence for a moment, the fire crackling between them, the shadows dancing on the walls. Sebastian will not give up, Alohan said finally. He is a man who believes the world owes him everything. Rejection only makes him more determined. Then he will learn that determination has consequences, Alaric replied. You do not understand. Alohan set her book aside, her hands twisting in her lap. He is the sort of man who ruins what he cannot have. If he cannot claim Blackmir through marriage, he will try to destroy it. To destroy me. He will fail. You speak as though you can command outcomes, she said, frustration creeping into her voice. But you cannot control society. You cannot stop gossip. The moment word spreads that I am living here, unmarried, and under your protection, my reputation will be shredded. And yours will be questioned. Alaric leaned forward, his gaze intense. I do not care what society thinks. You should, Alohan insisted. You are a duke. Your standing matters. Your alliances matter. I am nothing, no one, a footnote in a will that should never have included me. You are not nothing. I am a complication, she said bitterly. Sebastian was right about that much. Alaric's jaw tightened. He rose from his chair and crossed to where she sat, kneeling before her so that they were eye to eye. Listen to me, he said, his voice low and fierce. You are not a complication. You are not a burden. You are a woman of intelligence, strength, and grace who has survived years of neglect with your dignity intact. And I will not allow anyone, Sebastian or society or your own fear, to diminish that. Alohan's breath caught. Why do you care so much? Because you deserve to be cared for, he said simply. And because I find that I cannot imagine this house, or my life, without you in it. The words hung between them, too honest to be dismissed, too dangerous to be ignored. Alohan's hand rose, trembling, and touched his cheek. He closed his eyes at the contact, as though it were both a gift and a wound. You should not say such things, she whispered. Why not? Because it makes me hope, she admitted. And hope has always been a cruelty. Alaric opened his eyes, and the look in them was raw. Then let me be the exception. The following morning brought Agnes Rowley to Alaric's study, her expression troubled. Your Grace, she said quietly. I must speak with you about Miss Alohan. Alaric set down his correspondence. What troubles you? Agnes hesitated, then spoke with the careful honesty of a woman who had watched Alohan grow from child to woman. The late Earl was not kind to her. He was distant, cold, and often cruel in his indifference. Miss Alohan learned early to expect nothing, to ask for nothing, to be nothing. I am aware, Alaric said. Are you? Agnes's eyes held his. Because she is beginning to hope, Your Grace. And I fear what will happen when that hope is disappointed. Alaric's expression hardened. I have no intention of disappointing her. Intentions are not always enough, Agnes said gently. Society is vicious. Gossip spreads like fire. If you cannot protect her from scandal, then kindness alone will not be sufficient. Then I shall ensure she is protected in every way that matters. Agnes studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I believe you mean that. I do. Sebastian's revenge arrived not with violence, but with ink. 3 days after his departure, letters began circulating through London drawing rooms. Anonymous, but unmistakably his work. They hinted at impropriety. They questioned the Duke's motives. They painted Aloan as a woman of questionable virtue, living under the protection of a man known for his cold restraint. The whispers reached Blackmir through Lady Beatrice Ellingham, a society matron with connections to every prominent family in England. Her letter was brief and pointed. Your Grace, there is talk. The sort that ruins reputations before the accused even know they are on trial. I suggest you act quickly, or Miss Hartley will find herself unmarriageable and you will find yourself the subject of uncomfortable speculation. Lady Beatrice. Alaric read the letter twice, then called for his horse. He found Aloan in the walled garden, her cloak wrapped tight against the wind, her face turned toward the bare trees. We must speak, he said without preamble. She turned, and he saw that she already knew. Sebastian has begun his campaign. He has. Alaric moved closer, his expression grim. There are letters. Gossip. Society is beginning to question your presence here. Aloan's face went pale, but her voice remained steady. Then I will leave. I can take a cottage on the estate or find employment as a governess. You need not be burdened by my presence. You will do no such thing. Alaric. No. He caught her shoulders gently, forcing her to look at him. You will not sacrifice yourself to protect my reputation. You will not erase yourself to make this easier for anyone. Do you understand me? Then what would you have me do? She asked, her voice breaking. Stay here and watch as your name is dragged through scandal because of me? I would have you stay, he said fiercely. I would have you trust that I am capable of managing society's judgment. I would have you believe that you matter. More to me than any amount of gossip. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I am not worth this. You are worth everything. He pulled her into his arms, and she clung to him as though he were the only solid thing in a world that had always been shifting sand. I cannot lose this, she whispered against his chest. I cannot lose you. You will not, he promised. I swear it. Yet propriety would not survive what followed. The letter from London arrived on a gray morning, delivered by a rider whose urgency suggested trouble. Alaric broke the seal in his study, Aloan standing beside him, her hand resting lightly on the back of his chair. The letter was from Hogreave, and its contents were damning. Your Grace, Mr. Sebastian Hartley has formally challenged the terms of the late Earl's will. He claims that the inheritance was made under undue influence and that Miss Aloan Hartley, as the Earl's daughter, should be placed under the guardianship of her nearest male relative, namely, himself. He further alleges that her continued residence at Blackmir constitutes a compromise of her virtue, and that immediate action must be taken to preserve her reputation. A hearing has been scheduled for 3 weeks hence. Your presence, and that of Miss Hartley, will be required. Julian Hogreave. Aloan's face drained of color. He intends to claim guardianship over me. He will fail, Alaric said, but his voice was tight with fury. You cannot know that. She moved away from him, pacing the length of the study. The law favors male relatives. Society favors propriety. Sebastian will argue that my presence here is scandalous, and he will be believed. Then we will provide evidence to the contrary. What evidence? Aloan demanded. That you've been kind to me? That we have spent hours alone in the library? That you defended me against him? None of that will matter to a court that sees only impropriety. Alaric rose, crossing to her in 3 strides. Then we will marry. The words fell like stones into still water. Aloan stared at him, her amber eyes wide. What did you say? We will marry, he repeated, his voice steady. Before the hearing. It will render Sebastian's claims meaningless. You will be my wife, not my dependent. Society will have no grounds for scandal. That is not a reason to marry, she whispered. It is one reason. He took her hands, his grip firm and warm. But it is not the only one. Her breath came faster. Alaric, you do not have to. I am not offering out of duty, he said, cutting her off gently. I am offering because I want to. Because I have wanted to since the moment I saw you standing on those steps, refusing to be diminished. Because you have become the reason I stay at Blackmir instead of returning to London. Because I cannot imagine a future that does not include you. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I am afraid. Of what? That this is a dream, she said brokenly. That I will wake and find myself alone again, invisible again, nothing again. Alaric lifted her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to each palm. You are not nothing. You are everything. And I am asking you to marry me, not to save your reputation, but because I cannot bear the thought of not being yours. Alohan's sob was half laugh, half disbelief. You are serious. Entirely. She searched his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that this was obligation dressed as desire. She found none. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. Alaric pulled her into his arms, and for the first time since inheriting Blackmir, he felt something like peace. The household learned of the engagement within the hour, and the effect was immediate. Agnes Rowley wept with joy. The staff whispered with relief. Even the austere butler allowed himself a small smile. But it was Lady Beatrice Ellingham's response that mattered most. Her letter arrived the following day, swift and approving. Your Grace. Well done. Society will gossip regardless, but a wedding will silence the worst of it. I shall ensure the proper people are informed. Miss Hartley will be received. Lady Beatrice. Alohan read the letter twice, then set it aside with trembling hands. She approves. Of course she does, Alaric said. Lady Beatrice recognizes intelligence when she sees it. She will ensure you are welcomed. Welcomed as your wife, Alohan said softly. Not as myself. You are yourself, Alaric corrected. And you will be my wife. The two are not separate. That evening, they sat together in the library, the fire burning low, the shadows soft around them. Alohan leaned against Alaric's shoulder, his arm around her waist, the intimacy still new and fragile. There is something you are not telling me, she said quietly. Alaric stiffened slightly. What makes you say that? You are careful with your words, she observed. You choose them as though walking across ice. I know the signs. I have done the same my entire life. He was silent for a long moment, then sighed. There is a truth in my possession, one that concerns your father and my family. Alohan pulled back to look at him. What truth? Your father left me a letter, Alaric admitted. It explained why he left me the estate, why he destroyed my father, why he kept you at a distance. Tell me. Alaric hesitated, then spoke carefully. Your father discovered that your grandmother, before her marriage, bore a child out of wedlock. That child was given away. That child was my mother. Alohan's face went pale. We are related. Distantly, Alaric said. Your father and I share no blood. But your grandmother and my mother were mother and daughter. Alohan's hands trembled. That is why he ruined your father. To protect the secret. Yes. And that is why he left you everything. Her voice was hollow. To atone. I believe so. She rose abruptly, moving to the window, her arms wrapped around herself. He destroyed your family to protect a secret, and then he tried to make amends by giving you mine. Alohan. Do not, she said, her voice breaking. Do not tell me it does not matter. It matters. It means my father was capable of love and loyalty, but only for his wife. Not for me. Never for me. Alaric crossed to her, pulling her into his arms despite her resistance. Your father was a coward. He loved his wife and could not bear the thought of scandal touching her memory. So he pushed you away, thinking it would protect you from his guilt. He was wrong. Alohan's tears soaked into his shirt. I spent my whole life wondering what I had done to make him hate me. And now I know. I did nothing. I was simply a reminder of the woman he loved and the sin he committed to keep her safe. You are not a reminder, Alaric said fiercely. You are your own person. Brilliant, strong, worthy of love in your own right. And I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you. She looked up at him, her amber eyes bright with tears. You swear it. I swear it. He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to pull away, but she did not. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle at first, then deeper, fueled by months of restraint and the raw need to be known, to be chosen, to be loved. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. I should not have done that, Alaric said, though he made no move to release her. Why not? Alohan asked, her voice unsteady. We are engaged. We are, he agreed. But I would not have you think I kissed you out of pity or obligation. "I do not think that," she said softly. "I think you kissed me because you wanted to, as I wanted you to." Alaric's restraint cracked further. He kissed her again, and this time there was no gentleness, only hunger and the desperate need to claim what had been denied too long. Society would soon take notice. If you are still watching, then you are exactly where you belong. Stories like this do not come by accident. They are crafted with care, with passion, with respect for the power of narrative. But here is what most channels will not tell you. I cannot continue bringing you these stories without your support. Every video takes hours of research, writing, editing, and refinement. And the algorithm does not reward quality unless you, the viewer, signal that it matters. So I am asking you directly. If this story moved you, if you felt Alohan's fear and Alaric's restraint, if you want more tales where overlooked women become irreplaceable and honor is tested against desire, then subscribe now. Hit that notification bell. Do it not because I asked, but because you want to be here when the next story drops. Because I promise you, what comes next will be even more gripping. Do not let this be the last time we meet. Subscribe. Now. I will wait. London received them with cold courtesy and colder weather. The townhouse Alaric maintained in Mayfair was elegant but impersonal, a place for business rather than living. Alohan stood in the drawing room, her traveling cloak still fastened, and felt the city pressing against her like a weight. "You need not be frightened," Alaric said, coming to stand beside her. "I am not frightened," Alohan replied. "I am bracing." The hearing was scheduled for the following morning, and the night stretched before them like a battlefield waiting for dawn. Hargreave arrived that evening, his case files organized with military precision. "Your Grace, Miss Hartley," he greeted them. "I have reviewed Sebastian Hartley's petition. His claims are weak, but not without teeth. He will argue that the late Earl was not in his right mind when he drafted the will. He will present witnesses who claim the Earl spoke of leaving Blackmir to his nephew, and he will question Miss Hartley's virtue." Alohan's jaw tightened. "Let him." Hargreave's eyebrows rose. "Miss Hartley, I must warn you. I know what he will say," she interrupted. "He will call me compromised. He will imply that I seduced the Duke to secure my position. He will paint me as a scheming woman who manipulated a grief-stricken man. He will try," Alaric said quietly. "And he will fail." Hargreave cleared his throat. "There is one way to render his claims irrelevant. If you were to marry before the hearing." "We are engaged," Alaric said. "The banns have been read. The wedding is scheduled for 3 days hence." Hargreave's relief was visible. "That will help considerably. But we must still address the question of the Earl's mental state and his reasons for altering his will." Alaric withdrew the sealed letter from his coat. "I have his written explanation. It details his reasons fully." Hargreave took the letter carefully, reading it with growing astonishment. "Your Grace, this is explosive. If this becomes public—" "It will not," Alaric said firmly. "The letter will be submitted under seal, to be read only by the magistrate. It proves the Earl was of sound mind and had compelling reasons for his actions. That is sufficient. But it reveals—" "I know what it reveals," Alaric said. "And I am prepared to accept the consequences." Alohan's hand found his, squeezing tightly. The courtroom was crowded with spectators, society matrons and gentlemen who had come to witness scandal firsthand. Sebastian sat at the petitioner's table, his expression smug, flanked by a barrister whose reputation for ruthlessness preceded him. Alohan entered on Alaric's arm, her gown simple but elegant, her head high despite the whispers that followed her like smoke. Lady Beatrice Ellingham sat in the front row, her presence a statement of support that did not go unnoticed. The magistrate, Lord Justice Pendleton, was an elderly man with a face like weathered stone. He surveyed the room with evident distaste. "This matter concerns the will of Edmund Hartley, Earl of Blackmir," he began. "Mr. Sebastian Hartley contests the will on grounds of undue influence and improper conduct. The Duke of Ashbourne stands as executor and respondent. We shall proceed." Sebastian's barrister rose, his voice smooth and practiced. "Your Lordship, I shall demonstrate that the late Earl was not in his right mind when he altered his will, that he was influenced by parties unknown, and that his daughter, Miss Alohan Hartley, has been compromised by her residence at Blackmir Manor under the Duke's so-called protection." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Hargreave rose in response. "Your Lordship, we shall provide written evidence of the Earl's sound mind and clear reasoning. We shall also demonstrate that Miss Hartley's virtue is beyond reproach, and that her engagement to the Duke renders any questions of impropriety moot." The magistrate's gaze sharpened. Engagement? Yes, your lordship, Alaric said, rising. Miss Hartley has consented to become my wife. The banns have been read. The wedding is scheduled for 3 days hence. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Sebastian's face flushed with rage. This is a sham. A manipulation designed to circumvent my legitimate claim. Your claim is not legitimate, Alaric said coldly. It is opportunistic. You seek to control a woman who does not wish to be controlled in an estate that was never promised to you. The Earl spoke of leaving Blackmir to me. Sebastian insisted. He said so repeatedly. Words spoken in frustration are not legal commitments, Hargreave interjected. The written will is clear. The estate was left to the Duke of Ashbourne, with provisions for Miss Hartley's care. That is the law. Sebastian's barrister shifted tactics. Then let us address the question of Miss Hartley's character. She has lived alone with the Duke for months, unchaperoned, engaging in behavior that society deems inappropriate. How can she claim virtue under such circumstances? Eloan rose before Alaric could stop her. I lived alone with my father for years, she said, her voice clear and steady. Unchaperoned. Ignored. Dismissed. Society did not question my virtue then, because no one cared enough to notice I existed. Now that I am engaged to a duke, suddenly my character is suspect. The only thing that has changed is my value, and I will not apologize for becoming valuable. The courtroom fell silent. Lady Beatrice began to clap, slow and deliberate. Others joined her, and the sound filled the room like thunder. The magistrate banged his gavel. Order! Order! He turned to Hargreave. You mentioned written evidence? Hargreave submitted the sealed letter. The late Earl's final correspondence, your lordship. It explains his reasoning fully. The magistrate broke the seal and read in silence. His expression shifted from skepticism to surprise to something close to sadness. Finally, he looked up. The Earl's reasons are compelling and deeply personal. The will shall stand as written. Mr. Sebastian Hartley's petition is denied. Sebastian shot to his feet. This is not over. It is over, the magistrate said coldly. And if you continue to harass Miss Hartley or the Duke, I shall personally ensure that your debts and indiscretions become matters of public record. Do I make myself clear? Sebastian's face went white. He turned and left without another word. Outside the courthouse, Eloan stood on the steps, breathing in the cold London air. You were magnificent, Alaric said, taking her hand. I was terrified, she admitted. But I was also angry. And anger is easier to wield than fear. Lady Beatrice approached, her expression approving. Miss Hartley, you have won society's respect today. The wedding will be well attended. Thank you, Lady Beatrice, Eloan said sincerely. Do not thank me yet, Lady Beatrice replied. Society is fickle. But you have proven yourself clever and brave. That counts for more than most realize. That night, back at the townhouse, Alaric and Eloan sat before the fire, exhausted but victorious. It is over, Eloan said softly. Not quite, Alaric replied. We still have a wedding. She smiled, the expression transforming her face. I suppose we do. He rose and knelt before her, taking her hands. Eloan Hartley, I am asking you again, not because of scandal or society or legal maneuvering. I am asking because I love you. Will you marry me? Her eyes filled with tears. You love me. Desperately, he said. Completely. Without reservation. Then yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. Because I love you too. He pulled her into his arms, and they stayed that way for a long time. Two people who had been overlooked and underestimated, finally choosing each other. This was the moment her position became untenable in the best possible way. The wedding took place 3 days later in the private chapel at Blackmir Manor. The moors stretched wild and windswept beyond the windows, the sky a pale gray that matched the stone walls. It was not a grand affair. No hundreds of guests, no orchestras, no elaborate displays. It was perfect. Eloan wore a gown of cream silk, simple and elegant, with her hair arranged in soft waves. She carried no flowers, only a small book of poetry that had belonged to her mother. Alaric wore formal dress, his expression solemn as he waited at the altar beside Reverend Calder. Agnes Rowley wept quietly in the front pew. Lady Beatrice sat beside her, her presence a statement of approval. Hargreave stood as witness, his usually stern face softened by sentiment. As Eloan walked down the aisle, her eyes never left Alaric's. This was not a rescue. This was not obligation. This was choice, pure and deliberate. Reverend Calder began the service, his voice gentle and resonant in the small space. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of God. The words washed over them, familiar and sacred. When it came time for vows, Alaric took Alohan's hands and spoke with quiet intensity. I, Alaric Whitcomb, take you, Alohan Hartley, to be my wife. I promise to see you always, to value your mind, your strength, your heart. I promise to stand between you and any who would diminish you. I promise to love you, not because duty demands it, but because I cannot do otherwise. Alohan's voice trembled but did not break. I, Alohan Hartley, take you, Alaric Whitcomb, to be my husband. I promise to trust you, even when fear tells me not to. I promise to challenge you, to stand beside you, to build a life with you that neither of us could have built alone. I promise to love you, not because you saved me, but because you saw me. Reverend Calder smiled. By the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Alaric cupped Alohan's face gently, his thumb brushing away a single tear, and kissed her with a tenderness that spoke of reverence and promise. The small gathering applauded, and for the first time in her life, Alohan felt wholly, undeniably seen. The wedding breakfast was held in Blackmir's dining room, the table set with care, the food simple but abundant. Lady Beatrice raised her glass. To the Duke and Duchess of Ashbourne, may your union be long, prosperous, and blessedly free of scandal. Laughter rippled around the table. Agnes approached Alohan afterward, pressing a small package into her hands. Your mother would be proud of you. Alohan's throat tightened. Thank you, Agnes. You have grown into a woman of substance, Agnes continued. Do not let anyone make you forget it. I will not. That evening, as the last guests departed and the house settled into quiet, Alaric led Alohan to the master chambers. The room had been prepared with care. A fire burned in the hearth, candles glowed on the mantel, and the bed was draped in soft linens. Alohan stood near the window, her fingers tracing the glass, her reflection pale in the dim light. Alaric approached slowly, stopping just behind her. Are you nervous? A little, she admitted. Everything has changed so quickly. Too quickly, he asked gently. No. She turned to face him, her amber eyes steady. Not too quickly. Just different than I imagined. What did you imagine? I imagined being alone forever, she said simply. I imagined managing a house, reading books, growing old in silence. I never imagined this. I never imagined you. Alaric took her hands, lifting them to his lips. I am glad you were wrong. She smiled, the expression soft and genuine. So am I. He reached up slowly, removing the pins from her hair one by one, letting the dark waves fall around her shoulders. She stood perfectly still, watching him with an expression that was equal parts trust and anticipation. I will be careful with you, he promised. I know, she whispered. He removed his gloves with deliberate care, then cupped her face in his bare hands. The contact was electric, skin against skin, warmth against warmth. You are beautiful, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You are kind, she replied, her hands resting on his chest. I am in love, he corrected. There is a difference. He kissed her then, slow and deep, pouring everything he could not say into the kiss. She responded with equal fervor, her hands sliding into his hair, pulling him closer. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Come to bed, Alaric said softly. Alohan nodded, allowing him to lead her to the canopied bed. He helped her out of her gown with reverent care, his hands steady despite the desire that burned in his gaze. She stood before him in her chemise, vulnerable but unashamed. You are sure? He asked one last time. I am sure, she said firmly. He extinguished all but one candle, and they came together in the quiet darkness, husband and wife, finally and fully choosing each other. The intimacy was tender and reverent, a claiming that was also a gift. He worshipped her with touch and whispered words, and she gave herself freely, trusting him with everything she had kept hidden for so long. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his hand stroking her hair. I did not know it could be like that, Alohan whispered. Like what? Alaric asked. Safe, she said. I always thought intimacy would be something to endure. But with you, it felt like coming home. Alaric's arms tightened around her. You are home. With me. Always. She lifted her head to look at him, her amber eyes bright in the candlelight. I love you. And I love you, he replied. More than I thought possible. They drifted into sleep wrapped in each other, the wind howling across the moors outside. But inside Blackmir, everything was warm and safe and wholly theirs. Spring came to Blackmir with wildflowers and birdsong. Eloan stood in the library, sunlight streaming through the tall windows, a book open in her hands. But she was not reading. She was watching Alaric as he worked at the desk, his brow furrowed in concentration over estate ledgers. You are staring, he said without looking up. I am admiring, she corrected. He glanced up, his expression softening. Is there a difference? An important one. He set down his pen and crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. What are you admiring? The fact that you are real, she said, echoing her words from months ago. The fact that I am still here, still chosen, still loved. Always, he promised, kissing her forehead. A knock at the door interrupted them. Agnes entered, her expression apologetic. Your Grace, Lady Beatrice has arrived unexpectedly. Eloan and Alaric exchanged glances. Show her in, Alaric said. Lady Beatrice swept into the library with characteristic energy. Forgive the intrusion, but I bring news. What news? Eloan asked. Sebastian Hartley has left England, Lady Beatrice announced. His debts caught up with him, and he fled to the continent. You will not be troubled by him again. Relief flooded through Eloan. Thank you for telling us. There is more, Lady Beatrice continued. Society has fully accepted you, my dear. You are invited to the Duchess of Wharton's ball next month. It is the most sought-after invitation of the season. Your presence is requested specifically. Eloan glanced at Alaric, who smiled encouragingly. We shall attend, she said. Excellent, Lady Beatrice said. You have proven yourself, Duchess. Do not forget it. After she left, Eloan turned to Alaric. A ball. I have never attended a ball. Then we shall make it memorable, he said. I am nervous. You face down a courtroom full of hostile society matrons, Alaric reminded her. You can manage a ball. She laughed, the sound light and genuine. I suppose I can. That evening, as they walked the moors together, hand in hand, Eloan paused to look back at Blackmir Manor. It looks different now, she said. How so? It used to feel like a prison, she admitted. A place I was trapped. Now it feels like a home. A place I choose to be. Alaric pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. That is because you are free. Free to stay or go. Free to choose. I choose to stay, she said firmly. With you. Always. They stood there as the sun set over the moors, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. The wind carried the scent of heather and possibility. Inside the manor, a desk waited with an unopened compartment. A last secret left by Edmund Hartley, one that might reveal more truths or more pain. But that discovery could wait. For now, Eloan Whitcomb, Duchess of Ashbourne, stood in the arms of the man who had seen her when no one else had, and she knew, with absolute certainty, that she was finally where she belonged. He had claimed his enemy's estate and found, within its quiet shadows, the only fate he would ever willingly kneel to. But the shadows of Blackmir hold more than memories. That unopened compartment in Edmund's desk? It contains a letter addressed to someone neither Alaric nor Eloan expected. A name that will change everything they thought they knew about inheritance, loyalty, and the true cost of keeping secrets. If you want to know what happens when the past refuses to stay buried, and when desire wears a disguise, then you cannot miss what comes next. Thank you for walking these halls with us. Thank you for choosing stories where women are not rescued, but recognized. Where love is not convenient, but earned. Your presence here matters. Until the next tale unfolds, may you find yourself in places where you are wholly, undeniably seen. This has been Duke's Royal Library. We shall meet again.